Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mjengo podcast, where we share ideas. We are professionals who come and discuss things to do with Mjengo. And for today, we've had to convene a special podcast because on 6th of September, we woke up to news of 16 students killed in a dormitory fire in Nyeri, and the number has risen to 17. And the sad story is a fire, which we discussed quite some weeks ago about how our fire safety in the built environment, and the fire now resulting in children being killed. And so today we even have a specialist in fire safety. He's going to introduce himself, but first, let me introduce myself. My name is Brenda Nyawara. I'm an architect. And of course, I'm concerned about how safe our buildings are, especially with resistance to fire, or even being able to evacuate people in the case of a fire disaster. Let me allow my two other colleagues tonight to also introduce themselves. I'll start with Bwana QS.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to join all of you in this special podcast, which is more of a response to what is happening in the country. My name is David Nahinga. I'm a quantity surveyor. I design, build coast houses through my company, Mjengo, and we have a platform called Pod City where you can use which we use to manage projects from inception to completion. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, David. And today we even have an engineer joining us. We've not had an engineer in our podcast before, and so today we're lucky enough to have Joshua. Karibu, Joshua.
Thank you, Brenda. Like you've heard, my name is Joshua Kihara. I'm a fire protection specialist. I work with a firm called Benitech East Africa, where we supply, install, and maintain various fire protection systems and appliances. So, karibuni tena.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Nahinga. So just to go back to our topic for today, which is actually looking at a future without, a future where we don't have to worry about fire being a disaster that we can't manage or we can't escape. I mean, we're looking at us having a future without fires in our built environment. And the facts of the unfortunate event that led us to having this podcast 6th of September at Hillside and Arasha Academy Primary School in Nyeri, there was a fire in a dormitory that began around midnight. And then the news now hit the rest of the country in the morning. And when we look at the facts, you realize a lot of things were overlooked when it came to the design of that dormitory, to the design of evacuation, and so many other things that now we're able to unearth. And we can now look at other buildings existing and even how we can design for fire or even for resistance of fire in the future. So I'm really opening up this discussion to possibilities. Let's just not look at a design or the fire safety readiness of our city or county, but how else can we make sure this doesn't happen again? That we don't lose students, we don't lose people, or we don't even endanger people who are supposed to be in the building. And because we have our specialist here today, I want to give a chance to Joshua to just highlight, as a fire protection specialist, highlight the things that you would have, let's say, picked out from that disaster and start off our discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Brenda. Let me start off by saying my heart really goes out to the families of all those affected by this disaster. I think it's unfortunate and it's quite a tragedy. It's an unfortunate tragedy for young lives to be lost. I think the tally from the dailies, I think today was probably 18 young lives needlessly lost. So that's quite unfortunate. So let's, let me start off by saying, of course, we have this field of fire safety, and life and fire safety refers to the measures and systems put in place to protect people, property from the risks of fire and other hazards. So this looks at the design, the construction, the maintenance of buildings and other structures to minimize the risk of fire, smoke, and similar hazards. as well as the planning and the training needed to ensure that people can safely evacuate a building or other structure in case of an emergency. So we have four key principles of fire safety. And if you'll allow me, I'll just quickly run through them because I think this could form a platform that we can actually base our discussion on. So the first one is fire prevention. And this principle focuses on reducing the risk of fire by identifying and eliminating potential fire hazards, such as combustible materials, electrical hazards, and the like. The second principle is early detection and warning, which again focuses on detecting the presence of fire or smoke as early as possible and providing warning to building occupants so that they can safely evacuate. So this includes fire alarms, smoke detectors, or fire detection and notification systems. Then the third is containment and suppression. So this principle focuses on containing the fires once they've been detected. It includes fire suppression systems or appliances to put out the fire, ranging from fire extinguishers through to sprinkler systems, as well as fire barriers, fireproofing, and anything that will prevent the spread of fire in a building. Smoke control is also something I think that's also overlooked in our environment, but it also plays a key part in that area. Then the last is, of course, emergency planning and response. So which focuses on preparing and preparing for and responding to fires and other emergencies. This includes the development of evacuation plans, training for building occupants, and carrying out regular drills and exercises to test and refine emergency plans. So those four principles with those four principles of fire safety, I think we can look at the incident that we actually have. And I think there's been a lot of consideration about preventing fires. Um, there are various causes of fires. Like I don't know whether the final verdict is out on the Hillside and the Russia incident, but um, causes could be possible causes could have been arson, faulty electrical equipment, human error, including smoking, improper storage, poor housekeeping, even negligence, or forgetting to switch off an appliance. All those could have caused a fire in that area. But I'm actually of the opinion that we need to also move our conversation beyond just fire prevention and also look at fire protection as well as firefighting. So to illustrate, um, maybe we can look at a fire outbreak somewhere in other parts of the world. If you have a situation like what we've had at Hillside happen somewhere, say in the global north, a fire would break out. There will be various facilities that will be installed to detect that the fire is developing and alert people to evacuate. Facilities that, of course, we don't have in some of our facilities locally here. Then, of course, majority of fires, they'll start small. And I believe even at Hillside, probably that was the case. So if something is detected, if the developing fire would have been detected at the appropriate time, maybe that disaster could have been averted by having smoke detectors installed in the areas. Of course, out there, you have all areas. All areas are actually adequately covered with detectors in all areas. But in our case, maybe that is not that might not actually have been the case. So yeah, I think with that brief introduction, maybe we can see how to proceed.
That's brilliant. That's a great introduction.
Thank you, David.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Joshua. I want to give a chance to Nahinga to just give us his intro opinion on this fire disaster before I now get to the meat of the discussion, because I know we can recite all the requirements, all the bylaws, all the requirements for operations and management of dormitories and schools in regards to fire safety, but still a disaster would happen and we lose now 18 lives for children. I have several questions after that, but Nahinga, let's hear what you have to say before we go there.
So thanks for that introduction. Now, other than the four principles that Joshua has laid down, the engineer has laid down, for me, I want to look at it from a goal perspective, that Kenya has many incidences of unnecessary death, okay? Whether it is road accidents, whether it is when it is flooding, God forbid, if we have an earthquake, it will be disastrous. So for me, I have this thought that we need to aim for zero death, from zero unnecessary death, from any form of disaster. Let it be that we are not caught flat-footed, you know. So if we have a goal, let's say, of zero death because of fires, then it means whatever is truthful, whatever is scientific, we need to implement. And if there is laxity and there is loss of life, then we might have to go the route, the old way of saying, then let there be a life for a life. Because how can you take your child to a school and then you come back and you're told that the child is no more? It's completely unnecessary pain. And I'm sorry, I'm sorry about this unnecessary death that has happened in Russia. Poleni sana wazazi and the friends, neighbors, and the other schoolmates. So the thing I'm trying to say is, for me, we should aim for zero loss of life and zero loss of property. Because the technology is there, the science is there. What is it that we can't get one thing right in this country? Like, it is such a, we should not handle things in a lackadaisical manner, especially life, especially things that we have worked for, especially children who give meaning to our lives. You know, when you lose a child, life tends to be meaningless. You know, so I think for me, all this conversation should aim towards zero death, zero unnecessary death, zero unnecessary pain. And I recall one example at Strathmore University, I think 2015 or thereabouts. They had a drill. They were trying to simulate a terrorism disaster. And guess what happened? The people who were simulating this drill, this terror attack, ended up being terrorists. A lady, a staff member of Strathmore University, lost their life. Many students were injured. Some even jumped off the building. So you see, the suppression systems were there, the security officers were there, but we can't. Why can't we get small things right? You know. So for me, all the technical things we will say, regulation, all these 4Ps, another 5Es, whatever it is, the goal of this podcast should, when we finish this podcast, at the end of the day, we should have confidence that there will be zero unnecessary death out of things that are preventable or curable, or things that lie in our power to do. Wacha tulemewe na vitu zingine, other small things, but surely a fire is something that you can anticipate and you can prevent. So that's my brief introduction to this, Asante.
Yeah, I also agree. I think the end goal for any kind of policy, any kind of safety measure is zero deaths, zero injuries, because then are we creating buildings that are now becoming even more hazardous to people? And then I also have a reserve about how, if it comes to laws and policies, requirements, or information, we have books on fire safety that have been written from decades ago, that have been implemented when it comes, let's say, to the building code. I think we should also touch on what this new building code talks about when it comes to fire safety. A lot of specifications, a lot of requirements. Is it that we don't comply? Because I know this is still fresh. So from Hillside and Narasha Academy, we may not have the real cause of the fire, but let's even look at the other fires in other schools that happened way before, or in Gikomba Market, Toy Market, which happened less than a month ago. You know, you ask yourself, is it that we don't comply with what the building code says, or is it that the city or the county is not prepared? Because we can ask ourselves questions if the issue is lack of knowledge. And as Joshua has highlighted in just a few minutes, there's so much knowledge. There's so much that us as professionals know. And maybe Joshua, perhaps the public doesn't know this information. We might design a fire safety exit or fire exit, but then the public doesn't know, and therefore they would lock it up thinking it's supposed to be a security measure. Maybe you can let us know what exactly would be the gap between information that's out there about fire protection and the actual fire lack of protection in our buildings.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. I think you've raised a good point about fire exits. If I can just focus on the issue of fire exits, you've correctly highlighted that quite a number of buildings actually have fire exits, but in some cases they might actually be locked up or not functional. So you might have equipment stacked in front of them such that if there was to be an emergency, you're actually not able to use them or make use of them. Um, one thing that as somebody operating in this space, we advocate for our clients is to practice regular fire drills. And I think this is something that I believe should be in the building code, and I hope somebody will quickly check and see whether that is actually the case. Because fire drills, once they're implemented, and I think as a matter of they're probably in the law, the requirement is to have them done either every 6 months or at least once a year. That needs to be confirmed. But if you practice regular fire drills, you'd actually highlight some of these deficiencies that we have in some of our buildings. If you practice how you're going to evacuate from a room or a building, for that matter, you'll very quickly realize that maybe some of the doors that you're supposed to use as fire exits are actually locked. They're probably chained, and this happened because maybe you had a break-in in the past, and the management decided, no, we don't want to risk we want to give security a priority, and not so much the issue of fire and life safety. So practicing drills would actually bring to the forefront some of these deficiencies. And actually, it's good. I think David touched on that issue of Strathmore and the drill that we're trying to undertake. So, of course, it's not a very simple thing to do. It's something that needs quite a bit of planning. Actually, following that incident, I actually came up with some points on how to properly carry out a drill, and including the checks that you'd need to do prior to the actual fire drill to ensure that you don't have, well, I don't know whether you can eliminate accidents, and but certainly you should not have somebody losing their life as you are trying to carry out a fire drill. So there are designated ways and that you can carry out a fire drill that leads to a successful result that doesn't expose anybody, including the occupants, to the risk of injuries, accidents, and things like that. So that information is there. But like Brenda highlighted, the question is, are we actually doing it? Are we actually implementing these things in the buildings that we are actually in? Are we actually doing these drills?
My question would be, do the drills, are they actually carried out? Because the same way you're asking Joshua,
Mm-hmm.
if there's a fire safety procedure in any school, it means every time there's a new intake, there should be like a whole rundown of what should happen should there be a fire in this space. And unfortunately, if we look at the huge fire disasters in the country, besides Gikomba and the markets that have been burning down, unfortunately, it's the schools that have taken the biggest toll. We had 1998 Bombolulu claimed 26 lives. 1999 Nyeri High fire tragedy claimed 4 lives. 2001, which was still remembered by many people because of the number of people it claimed, in Kianguli, 67 children died out of the fire. And there are several others. There's one in 2012, Asumbi Girls. Sorry, not 2012. Moi Girls was in 2017, killed 10 girls. Asumbi Girls was 2018, killed 8 students. And then from the trend of things, we're looking at dormitories specifically. I mean, what does a building code say when it comes to designing spaces where we have multiple students residing, and especially where you'd have a higher number of population compared to a conventional apartment buildings? Our dormitories used to have like 3 or 4 students per in a small, let's say, less than 6 square meters. You had like 4 students. And imagine a school that has like 1,000 students, how large a dormitory would be and how many exits that would be. Perhaps we can reference back to our building code. Nahinga, if you have the tips, Mjengo, if you have the tips, does our building code really specify just for dormitories? Because clearly dormitories are the target for this kind of fires. Have you had any kind of, especially in our new building code, any kind of references, any kind of special consideration? Because this is now a disaster going forward, and it has been a disaster from over 20 years ago.
So, first of all, for me, looking at the cases you've highlighted, Bombolulu, Kianguli, Asumbi girls, Moi girls. Now, the thing is this: from a policy point perspective, what needs to happen? We first need to do an audit of the current state of fire safety in schools and public buildings. So we start there. We start with schools and public buildings for two reasons. One, the highest number of people congregate or are found in those two spaces, because at home it is a three-bedroom house. I mean, it's a family of 3 or 4 people. So that one it is easier to handle. It's easier to handle that one at home. But as a starting point, we need to do an audit of all public buildings, okay, and all schools. Now, that study will reveal the current measures in place, the capacity. Are these dormitories overcrowded? You know, because you see, if you have a door of a particular size, let's say it is even an escape, a door for escaping, a fire escape door, okay, which complies with the building code in terms of the size and the resistance to fire. And so the thing is this: even if you follow the building code, but then you overcrowd the space, you overcrowd the room, in case someone shouts, and this is the thing about human beings, it so happens that these two words, help and fire, are just 4 letters. You can, once someone shouts fire, the number of people who rush to the escape routes or the door can overwhelm even the provision. So if the space is overcrowded, if the space is already overcrowded, okay, then you will have injuries and death and loss of life, you see. Now, the audit will reveal the incapacity. It will reveal areas to improve. It will reveal whether the school even has a code to handle disasters or to prepare, or these 4 Ps that the engineer was saying, okay, early detection, containment, suppression, prevention. So we need to do like an audit of all schools. The second thing, we need to look at the fire safety regulations and enforcement. Because even if you have regulations and they are not enforced, you will still end up with disasters. And then on the professional side, we need to design fire resistant buildings. So we also need to do, like, all the professional bodies should now turn their continuous professional development courses or seminars towards this thing, so that all built industry professionals are well equipped to design buildings going forward that are compliant to protection of life and preventing loss of property due to disasters like fire. So that's my brief take for now.
Nahinga, I have a question.
Yes,
So, do you think the security threat that faces such dormitories or even buildings in general is higher compared to the need to be prepared for fire safety, because most often times we do the grills on the windows because of security, and yet the windows are the ones we could use to evacuate. But we prioritize the grills because perhaps security is a bigger threat. We lock the fire exits because, again, security might be a bigger threat. Some materials that we use may not be easy to demolish in a case where you need to actually pull apart a wall or a part of a building to evacuate people, again, because of security. So is the balance between security and fire safety, is it justified, or really we should just put aside security and make sure we are ready for the fire exits when we need to?
So from a design perspective, so let's start with the basic principle. The principle is that all problems are solvable. All problems are solvable, and all problems that man faces is because of lack of knowledge. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that if we live in a society where we have rampant theft, okay, which is something, is an attack on private property or public property, does it mean that we are incapable of designing houses with large windows and at the same time houses that will not become death traps? I think this is a challenge to designers to go back and see what do we need to do? How do we start designing our houses in a way that they are still aesthetically beautiful and at the same time they do not lead to entrapment of the users? So, for example, now when people are trying to cut costs when they're designing for both security, privacy, and allowing people to escape, what they do is that they pick a single state solution. What do I mean? You see, if you can be able to create a grill that is openable, and at the same time a window that is a door that allows you to enjoy the outdoor by looking through like a large window pane, okay, like a large sheet of glass. You see, if you are trying to cut costs, you will just go for one solution, like you would do a metal door. So most houses, most apartments, most public buildings, the external door, we have defaulted. We are designing with fear, and when you design with fear, you end up with a less optimum solution. So what we have ended up by default designing are armories. I would call them, they are not even safe for human habitation. So you have a door that the thief, so we have over-designed for the thief and forgotten that at some point, someone needs to run out of this building when it catches fire. So we have over-designed for the thief. So we are designing out of fear. Can we put all the problems on paper and say, my client wants to be safe, but also needs to escape? Then we find a way of designing. So it's a challenge to architects and engineers, and I'm trying to say that let us not adopt a lazy way of thinking, because if all problems are soluble, then the question is, we just have not yet designed the solution. Are you with me? Yeah? Hello?
Yes, we are very much with you. Actually, what I'm seeing right now, news coming in
Yes.
from Nyakundi. He's just posted literally 20 minutes ago that, which school is this? Isiolo Girls is on fire.
Jesus.
And I'm seeing videos, people arriving on scene, people trying to evacuate. I mean, this is a disaster that's ongoing. So even as we discussed, it's quite unfortunate that it's still ongoing. Like even from Tuesday, we still haven't been, not Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we still haven't gotten the actual responses that we needed to avoid something like this happening again, just a couple of days later. And let me just take this back to Joshua, because I wanted to ask about the fire safety certificate. Because normally any institution, any school, every year they're required to apply for a business permit, permitting them to open their doors up to students and to children. And they're supposed to declare how many number of students or children are supposed to occupy those spaces, they are supposed to also have, in my opinion, provisions to allow them to have that fire safety certificate, right? Unless we flaunt the law that we have and that's not followed. But ideally, if you see in Nairobi City County, for you to apply for a business permit, there are other things underneath that you are supposed to also have, and there are requirements for you to provide for you to get that fire safety certificate. So Joshua, might you be aware of requirements that a building at least an institution is supposed to have for them to get it, or do we just get it and it's something you automatically pay for and renew every year? Because I think that's where now we start from. When it comes to designing, when applying for approval, we provide all the fire safety requirements. But now for the maintenance of a building, all throughout its life cycle, there must be some other way in which authority can come in and restrict you from having people occupy that space if you don't have this fire safety certificate. What are the procedures?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Brenda. And on the issue of the fire certificate, um, interestingly, that certificate is currently issued together with your business permit. So annually, when you go to renew your business permit, it comes lumped together with your business permit. So essentially, all that means is all you need to do is to pay. Once you're able to pay, no matter what equipment you have in your facility, generally, I don't think they are going around to check and confirm what facilities you actually have, what the fire risks are, and things like that before you get that fire certificate. So really, I think what has happened is we've sacrificed fire safety for convenience. So now it's convenient to get your fire certificate together with your business permit. All you do is pay, but at the expense of fire safety. I think what used to happen in the past is there used to be two separate documents, and I think that change came a couple of years back, probably I think during the era of probably the last, not the last governor, probably during the Kidero era, I think when he was governor. But this issue of combining the certificate, before that, there were two separate documents. So for the business permit that you'd get from the city council, but for the fire certificate that will actually be issued by the fire brigade. So they'd send somebody to your offices to check, what do you have, the equipment that is needed? Do you have fire alarms? Are your fire doors locked? Are they accessible? Are they usable? And I think that's something that we've lost, and maybe we should consider bringing back, because definitely there was value in terms of fire safety. It was definitely, I think, a better arrangement.
So basically, the bit about fire safety certificate that's applied for every year, it's a revenue earning thing for authorities. They really do not go and check the actual premises to see if they deserve to renew their fire safety certificate. That's basically the truth on the ground. And then number two, as Nahinga had said, we over-design for thieves and other perceived insecurity compared to actual safety of the people who use our spaces. I mean, our priorities are really they're so misplaced. And in my opinion, I also feel like the lack of lawlessness, because truth be told, anyone who hears about a dormitory fire, the first assumption is that number one, the door was locked. I mean, that's the first assumption. The door was locked, and the person probably responsible to open such doors in terms of emergency was unavailable, and there was no other provision for it being opened. And I'm pretty sure in any school or institution or any building, you'd have provisions where if it's a set of keys for opening or closing or evacuation, there's someone who's responsible for it. If it's fire safety, there's someone who is responsible for making sure we have the fire extinguishers inside there. There's at least there's a person or authority responsible for it, and they just do not do their job, which means we end up with such disasters. I want to also take us back to not just the schools or dormitories, but even just fire safety for our homes, because we all live in houses where you could be asleep and something happens and it's a fire. and you need someone or at least you need someone who's knowledgeable at your space to be able to make sure you're safe before authorities even arrive at your location. So as a human being, as a person just in your house, how best can you protect yourself to avoid a disaster where you and your family are at risk, where you cannot really evacuate or you can't save your property and your belongings because of a fire?
If if I
Maybe
may if
Brent.
I may speak, if I
Go
may
ahead, David.
speak, you see,
Yes, Nahinga?
yes, you see the issue about revenue. We should delink money making measures from life and death issues. Unaona, hii mambo ya kuweka pesa mbele kila kitu, we worship this money too much, because when you are applying for your business permit, that exercise is completely not related in any way to the issue of fire and safety. And so the officer who is giving you the business license is just interested in revenue targets. And so they don't even come and do inspections to check whether you yourself know how to use the firefighting equipment. Now, so that's number one. We need to delink. There are things in life we must delink from money making issues. It's just like we should treat it like this. If you have miners if you have miners, people who are mining and they are trapped in a gold mine, so you will start asking them to produce money so that you can rescue them. We delink. We have to delink. When it comes to life, we must delink the money making aspect. We should find ways of loading that revenue source into something else, so that we handle the situation. I'll give you an example. You spoke about lack of knowledge or how to approach if a fire happens in a school. Okay, now we should begin at the education level. So fire safety education is not systematically integrated into the curriculum in many schools. Okay, so when a fire happens in a dormitory, the students need to have the knowledge of at least being able to put out small fires. Like if one mattress imeshika moto, I think we should look at it from an education perspective, so that everybody in that room is equipped to deal with that fire. Because if we delegate this thing to one person who is having the key na anakuja na lock mlango, or they are having their own domestic issue, or they are not in that space, then you end up with these frequent disasters. So we need to equip the students, the teachers, and the staff in the school. And then maybe we should even designate certain, like 10%, we should designate 10% of the staff to be fire marshals, okay? And 10% of the teachers, the same. And even 10% of the students to be fire marshals, so that in case fire happens, we have it in our educated instinct, a response of dealing with the fire. So we have to bring this to be part of the education, just like we teach communication skills and first aid. I think fire safety education should become a matter of priority in our schools and our public spaces. So those are 2 points I wanted to raise.
You said something very important there about this information on fire safety should be available to everyone. Everyone should be aware of fire being a potential disaster, and fire safety steps and procedures actually are the responsibility of everyone who's in that space. I actually do agree, because again, fires can happen where the person who's in authority to open or lock doors is not present, or the person who knows best how to use a fire extinguisher, or the person who knows best on which spaces are supposed to be used for evacuation. They're not always present. And so here, what you've said about everyone should be aware, and everyone, especially people from the outside, also rushing in to help. Because I can see live videos from Isiolo, and we're seeing there's a huge crowd already outside. And I'm sure they want to help, but do they know what step they're supposed to take as someone who is outside trying to assist people who are in the actual like danger zone. So I agree. I agree in schooling the public, schooling everybody, and letting everyone know it's their responsibility. Something else I want to ask when it comes to fire safety, because I can see some pointers on the building code and whatnot. I know very well
Brenda,
that
Brenda, if I
yes,
may interject,
yes,
before you move up from that point of training and getting the information out there, I think that's primarily why drills are so important, and it's an area that we should focus on as a society. I think we've lost a lot by not enforcing the need to have drills done, because drills do they serve several purposes, and one of them is they provide a scenario or an opportunity for people to be trained on
mm-hmm.
fire and fire safety and evacuation procedures, and even how to use the equipment. And you see, you can't carry out a drill unless you have the proper equipment. So so it actually shines a spotlight on your building. And before you do your drill, you need to make sure that your building is up to code. It has the equipment that is needed. The fire exits are not blocked. So it actually reinforces all these things that we are trying to achieve. So having drills done periodically, whether twice a year or even once a year, I think will provide a very good avenue for people to get the information, to be trained, to set up fire evacuation procedures and things like that. It'll greatly help. It'll really greatly help.
Agreed, agreed. And I'm realizing now fire safety procedures might actually be a bit more complicated than what we know as laymen. And what we are aware of. And I feel members of the public may absolutely not be even prepared for this at all. I want to ask also now, because if we are holding people responsible and calling them out on their tasks that they let down, we can first of all agree very well that we do flaunt when it comes to building code and what kind of materials are used in construction, what kind of steps we miss out on and we choose to not include or not consider when designing. Because if it was a well-designed building, even if a fire breaks out, a fire would not spread that fast enough where evacuation would not be possible. I mean, I know there are some materials which have a higher fire rating, yes, but then there are some which so clearly are very susceptible to fire. Now, we can at least agree that if it's built environment, if it's the professionals who are designing, plus also the authorities who are involved in regulation, NCA, the counties that, number one, approve the buildings, plus also give out the building permits, which include fire safety certificates, could have let us down when it comes to such disasters. And while we are trying to do, low cost housing, something that we can afford, most times when we overlook the fire rating of our walls, of our windows, of our trusses, of our ceiling boards, then now we lead to disaster. And for sure, I think Nahinga, me and you can also take the blame on behalf of built environment professionals, because how much of emphasis do we put on fire safety when we are designing our houses? How
So
much emphasis do we put?
let me say something on the design, because you see, I said all problems are solvable, and we are suffering for lack of knowledge. Either the people who are the custodians of this design knowledge are not applying it, or the clients are resistant in allowing this knowledge to be applied, or there is some lack somewhere. So let's think about a concept. We call it compartmentalization. So think of a dormitory as a space. It's a single space with one function. Some have two functions, like there's a side where you can go and shower, and then there's a second side for sleeping. It has beds, it has lockers for storage of clothes and all that. Now think of a design. I want you to do a thought experiment. Think of a dormitory that has been designed with an extra room which is smoke proof, which cannot break down easily in case there's fire in the first compartment, and which can actually open to the outdoors. But it's a temporary space, because now we are trying to balance security of the students, we are trying to balance security of the users of an ordinary house, We are trying to balance it in terms of keeping the property secure, but also not endangering life. So if we added a compartment in your typical 3-bedroom house and you have a room, Tajiris, they call it a panic room. But that one is when the thief has finally broken into the house, you can go into this other space. You remember the story of Wanjigi, where Jimmy Wanjigi, when he was saying hamwezi nipata hata mkikuja hamwezi nipata kwa hii nyumba, okay, which means it is likely that he has a panic room that cannot be penetrated by whatever method. So think of it that way, that a dormitory should have another extra room, okay, another compartment, which is a safe space where the students can go and stand in as this person who has the key finds his way in. Now, what you're looking at from Isiolo right now is that the whole building is engulfed in fire, and there is no escape. If the door was locked, there is no escape. So we should start thinking that way, that look, we need a plan B. Hii nyumba ikichomeka, if the dormitory burns, and remember mattresses, even if you put fire resistant doors and use materials that are flammable, mattresses in themselves produce a lot of toxic smoke when they catch fire. So you can imagine a situation where it's a double-decker bed and then the lower mattress imewaka. I mean, that amount of smoke, we need to have a way of having automatic sprinklers, okay, and another compartment within that building as a design intervention. Because you can't just lose lives like that, you know. So this second compartment is a temporary space where the children can be rescued in case fire breaks out in the next in the dormitory. And how the shape, how the form, what design it will take is up to now designers to say, look, if we were to execute this idea, okay, as a measure, how will it look like? And so schools which implement such an idea would rank highly in terms of safety. We should start ranking schools also in terms of the safety of the children. We take children to these spaces, and we have no way of judging. Ukipeleka mtoto first term in Form 1, you're just given a form you fill, you're shown this is where your child will sleep. We are not given space to interrogate the compliance level of these spaces, okay? So that's a design intervention that can be used to solve that problem. And I'm sure there
I like that idea. I like that.
100%.
I like that. The bit about, we talk a lot about the green rating of a building. And now I think it's good we say the fire rating of a building, or even now when schools talk about, oh, we have high passing students and whatnot. Tell us about your fire safety as well, because I bring my child there. The number one reason I'm likely not to get them back home is fire, basically, this year, right? So yeah, I agreed 100%.
Andika hiyo mahali hapo kwa your to-do list. Let's create
Let me write it.
a rating card. So it will have things like
for schools.
Yes, it will have these 4 things. It will have. We should be able to go around schools and rate these schools based on that scorecard. The same way you have a scorecard for green buildings, where you look at energy efficiency and use of local materials. We should have another rating card, a scorecard which we can use to walk into any school and say, by the way, this is a disaster waiting to happen. Otherwise, what we have are just death traps.
Agreed. I want to take us back now to a little bit about facilities that we need now going forward. Not just for public buildings, but even in my home, in my own house. Joshua, tell us what preparedness can I maintain in my house or in my building, in my business place, for me to be ready and for me to be able to resist fire and evacuate safely?
Just a joke. Most people's level of preparedness is to say, I'm very ready for Tuesday.
Yes, agreed.
Can you give us the meat? How can you be ready?
And it's like Our preparedness is normally the water in our
Ndio, I'm
sufuria.
telling you, we are treating fire ni kama maandamano. I am really
Kama
ready. I'm
maandamano.
ready for Tuesday.
No, no,
Umeambiwa
no.
ng'ombe
No, we are
imeanza
not ready for
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Hiyo maandamano, you carry a bottle of water na handkerchief. That's engineer. Engineer,
For
can we
sure.
take it beyond being ready for Tuesday?
We'll need to. We'll need to. We can definitely do better.
Help us,
When it comes
Engineer.
to facilities for dealing or now fighting the fires, because what we also need to realize is fires will occur, whether we do fire doors, we do firewalls and things to resist or prevent or avoid the fires. They will occur at some point in time. So when they do, we need to be ready. And facilities are numerous, they're diverse. Of course, cost is always a factor, but they range among the following. So the first and the most basic is what you call portable fire extinguishers. Those are the small fire extinguishers. Probably most of you have them in your cars. They're the small 1 kg that we normally have inside our vehicles. In case you have a fire, you can use that on your vehicle in case it catches fires. And cars do actually burst into fire from time to time these days. I'm not sure what has changed. So you have bigger extinguishers. And for the home, normally a dry powder, a multi-purpose dry powder will more than serve the purpose for an up to say 2 bedroom house. Anything larger than that, then you need multiples of fire extinguishers, maybe one downstairs, one upstairs. The other thing that people also need to look at, especially for their homes, is detection systems. There are instances where a fire builds all actually most, I'll not say all, but most fires start small, but given time, they develop into huge infernos. So if you can have a means of detecting the fire while it is still small, you can actually use these first aid or portable extinguishers to extinguish the fire. So these days we have smoke detectors for the home. We have smoke detection or fire alarm systems for buildings and offices and I'd say even schools. But as a minimum, we should have smoke detectors. In homes, you can have a battery operated. It doesn't have to be a complicated thing or a very expensive thing. You can have a battery operated smoke detector, which you just plug in the space immediately outside your kitchen. Somebody mentioned most home fires start in the kitchen. That is actually correct. So the area to put those single station or battery operated smoke detectors is actually immediately outside your kitchen. And what purpose does that serve is if you're asleep and a fire is developing in your kitchen or anywhere within the house, it produces a loud enough sound to wake you up. Otherwise, past a certain point, it's too late and you be able to evacuate your home. So we also have other fire appliances. Other than the first aid appliances, you have things called hose reels, which produce a large volume of water, which schools, I think, uh, going forward, should probably be one of the mandatory things that they should have, because past a certain point now you need a huge water source. Water, by the way, is the best firefighting medium known to man. When the fires become huge or large, water is the way to go. That's why the fire brigade, when they come inside their truck, they actually carry water. So having a storage of water that you can use when the fire becomes large and out of control really helps. So host rails can greatly help with that. We also have automatic systems like hydrants and sprinklers. These are usually used in large buildings. I think in other countries they are definitely installed even in homes, in people's offices and small abodes. So even here we can start thinking and working towards having those automatic systems installed. They'd greatly help reduce the risks as well as the instances of loss of life, which I think is totally unacceptable. Brenda, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And I feel like this information will continue to educate the public on this, because I know sometimes only when such disasters happen is when now we all scramble to take care of such measures. And then when nothing happens, we let go, because even now, surely, flooding. Have we gone back to all the measures we said about flooding being a disaster, a national disaster back in February, March, April? Maybe we've forgotten about it, right? And then fire comes and goes, and then we forget about it until the next time it happens. And now it's again preparedness. But Joshua, you really enlightened us today. I didn't even know a lot of the things. First of all, about fires in vehicles. That's also something else that I think we kind of overlook.
Yes.
So let me take like our final remarks on this future without fires before we close for the evening. I can start with Nahinga.
I think you're muted, David.
I'm not. Am I? You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so I wanted to say just a comment. You know, when Joshua was talking about fire detection, I kept thinking about the nose. There's a reason you have a nose. So what we are saying is you outsource your nose to another thing. You know, when you're asleep, you might not be able to use your nose as a fire
No, no.
detection mechanism on a
No,
small
it will not
device.
work. It
It
will
will
not
not
work.
work. Sababu in fact, when there's a fire na unaota, you will be dreaming that you are walking on coal. You are now the one seated on a chariot of fire.
Or you're
You are
roasting meat.
or you are roasting meat na inaiva vizuri, kumbe it's your leg burning. So what we are saying, please, can you outsource your nose? Weka kwa another detector. That thing should not cost more than 10,000. I don't know. I've never bought one. It's a lesson also to me that I need to
David,
outsource the work of
David,
my
on
nose.
that issue of cost, I can tell you that the detector will set you back about, I think, 3 or 4 thousand bob.
Imagine.
The portable extinguishers,
Yes.
the multi-purpose one, the largest, will set you
Yes.
back about 3 or 4 thousand bob as well. So they're not expensive. For your car, it's 1,000 bob or 1,500.
Honestly.
For Brenda, you could definitely do with a fire blanket in your kitchen. It's just 1,500 bob, I think. So they're not expensive.
My
We
loving
should have.
father, my loving father, his nickname was Fire. I don't know where he got it, but his nickname was Fire. Okay? But I remember we used to have this Volkswagen, KCN 999. And he used to carry a gunia of mchanga. And I now I'm beginning to think that is where he got the nickname Fire, because every time that car akienda nayo sana, it used to go up in flames, and he would just confidently come out with his gunia of sand and nanazima, and the reggae continues. So I don't know what was making it go up in flames, but he was the most prepared fire by name, and a marshal. I wanted to say something on design. So the way we bring on board structural engineers at the design stage and electrical engineers, I think mechanical and electrical engineers should, as a matter of priority, incorporate these aspects about fire in the design stage mapema, and we as quantity surveyors, we should capture the cost. The same way we capture cost for a site office, we should capture the cost for in the bill, within the bill of quantity. Client should ask always that, have you captured firefighting, fire preparedness measures within the structure of my project? Because we have people building gazebos and landscaping and having a doghouse and clothesline, but they forget to allow for this disaster preparedness. So I think as professionals, we can introduce that mapema at the design stage.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think clients being able to also ask the same question of their professionals, and then fellow professionals also making sure that they keep each other in check when it comes to making sure we have these fire protection measures. Because the architect may design, but the mechanical engineer may not provide fire, let's say, what do you call those, fire sprinkler systems, or the QS when doing the BQ might actually overlook all the things that you're supposed to have inside there, and then it gets overlooked during construction. And that's where the steps come from. And I would even say again now, my closing shot would be, parting shot would be to authorities. We pay taxes so that we can have fire trucks that can respond to disasters in minutes. We also pay fire permits every year for that fire safety certificate. That means we are supposed to be held accountable with what we're providing in our spaces for fire safety, but we also holding the fire authority of the particular space or county, city responsible for responding to us when the need arises. Because truth be told, fires sometimes are unavoidable. And when they happen, the main aim is safety of the people and the property that is affected or at risk. So, of course, local authorities definitely should not be left behind when we're trying to find who to take responsibility for this. And something I would like to also see, let's see prosecution, let's see investigation, let's see people going to jail if it was negligence or arson that led to the fires. I'm trying to look for like the causes and the actual like resolutions from the past fires in dormitories. I can't find any online, and that might mean that justice wasn't served to the people who actually were affected. Let's see the law taking place that will also motivate many other people to follow the law when it comes to now risks that are claiming children's lives. That should never happen again. Um, Joshua, parting shots, then now we can wrap it up. Joshua, you're muted.
Sorry, I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I was saying as a practitioner in the space, I think what I'd say as a parting shot is we really need to get the word out there about fire drills. I tend to think if those were implemented and carried out as regularly as the law prescribes, because I do believe they are prescribed at least every 6 months or at least once a year, according to the law. If we can get those done, most of these issues will come to light automatically and be sorted out and addressed. Because as you do the drills, like I said, you can mix them up with the training sessions or refresher sessions if you've already had training before. If you've not had training, that's a good opportunity. And when you do the drills, you actually go through the motions of checking, do we have the right fire equipment? Have they been serviced as regularly as they should? Are the fire doors working? Do we have fire doors? What hazards do we have around us, and all those? So fire drills, fire drills, fire drills. I think we should spread that word.
Engineer, just a
Agreed.
question.
And let's not rely on our noses as fire disaster fire detectors because yeah,
Just, just a question.
absolutely not.
Just a question, Engineer.
Yes.
Is there a way of removing smoke quickly in a building, like something that can extract smoke quickly, like other than having the detector? Of course, the detector will say there's a source of smoke, but is there something that can quickly extract smoke? Because most people, I think, when you're engulfed in before the fire gets to you, the smoke can actually kill you before, because you will cough, you will not lack of oxygen. So are there engineering systems that can rapidly extract smoke in a building?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, David. Yes, they are. They're actually called smoke vents, and they should be installed in buildings at strategic places. But I'm sure you can appreciate this is a vent with a fan that will extract the air in case of a fire. So this is actually connected to the fire alarm, the building fire alarm system, which forms an integral life safety system in all buildings. So I think in other countries, fire alarms are mandated in all buildings. I think all schools, before you can build them, you need to have fire alarms incorporated in your designs, and then they are integrated. They're integrated into things such as lifts. They're integrated into those smoke vents and a lot of other systems, so that there is control in case of a fire, in addition to people knowing and evacuating. So yes, they are.
So then the one last thing before we close. There's the problem we had discussed in another episode of this Mjengo podcast, that urban planning has a role to play. You see, like if fire breaks out in a place that is inaccessible, even the fire truck may not be able to go and help the people who are facing the disaster. So I think we should embrace new technology. I luckily I managed to see a video from China where they're using drone technology to suppress fire. So I think we should embrace new technology and new ways of, because you see, if we have on one hand poor urban planning, and the fire hydrants that we have purchased cannot access the last house in the slum, then we should have enough drones in case there is fire, enough drones that are linked to the water source and that can be remote controlled to access the places where there is fire. So I think also we need to modernize the fire departments at the county, at the towns, and in our churches. Juu hata huko kwa kanisa moto inaweza anza tu. Asanteni sana. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great
you.
weekend. It was nice contributing. Let's keep the conversation going. Asante sana.
Yeah, we had a really good conversation, and I feel like we'll still be talking about this more as we see what kind of measures our country actually takes when it comes to fire safety. And let's not forget, there was an explosion in Embakasi also a couple of months ago, and it claimed very many lives as well, gas explosion. And of course, that's one of the causes of fire. So yeah. Thanks so much, Joshua, for taking your time to be with us today, and also Nahinga, always a good eye opener. Over designing for thieves. That's something I'm still going to still be thinking about. But it's been a nice conversation. Yes.
Thank you.
Mahali. Kuna guilt, Ume over design for thieves.
We over designed for thieves.
Sawa,
It's a
asante.
All
fact.
right.
It's a fact.
As a fact, yes.
Have a great
And
weekend.
asanteni,
Okay, thank you.
asanteni also to our watchers, and I hope you have gained something. And if you have, follow us on all our socials, Mjengo Podcast, and then let's continue on the conversation. Thank
Okay,
you.
asante sana.
Thank
Have a
you.
great weekend.
You too.
Nahinga went off immediately.